This lesson is dedicated to the effects rollout. Now, effects are really awesome. These are going to allow you to extend the existing features of Forest Pack by adding new functions from a library, or you can import effects from a third party. So in this lesson, we're going to go over a couple of them. There are a lot of effects. They are well documented inside Forest Pack, and a lot of the times you're going to have to experiment to see the actual end results. So we're going to dive into quite a few of them in this lesson, and then it's going to give you a basic understanding of what you can actually do with them. So to speed up the process, I have already gone ahead and populated a lot of Forest Pack surfaces, so we can just dive straight into the effects tab. The first one is the ball animation. All I've done is I've just animated a ball, literally just going across the Forest Pack surface that I created. Now let's go into this Forest Pack. I have labeled it Bend by Object. That is the name of the effect that we're going to do. So if you can locate effects, which is right over there, this is our tab over here. The first item is to add an effect. It is important to click this button first because you have to add a placeholder, and then we're going to use this button to add the effect to the placeholder. So create, remove, and then this one is to select the effect that we want. This one over here will allow you to actually see the programming code behind the effect. So if you've got knowledge in that, you can manipulate that. We've got the on and off switch. We've got the hierarchy switch because you can stack effects on as well. Over here will be the name of the effect, and the rest of the parameters will go through slowly. So we've added a placeholder. Let's click this button right over here, and it will bring up the entire default library. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. Now, they are categorized to give you a basic understanding of what each one can do for you. So from animate effects to color, displaced surfaces, and the list goes on and on. Now, this is the default library. You can generate your own library, so you can either create your own or you can import them from a third party. The refresh button will obviously refresh it in the event that it's not reflecting. Just refresh it, as we've learned in the library browser. So the default library will show you a whole bunch of effects that we can use. This one specifically, we are going to be using the Bend by Object, and that is located under the Dynamics category. So let's click Bend by Object. What's really great is it does give you a understanding of how to set it up. So we can go through these settings and these instructions, and then obviously we can go and learn how to do it. So I'm going to load the effects tab already, and you can see over here that it's populated with a couple of parameters that we can play with. Now we got lean out amount. That is telling you how much you want the actual object to affect the scattered objects, how much you want them to lean out. We've got a distance parameter, which is going to allow us to create almost like a fall off. We got wiggle amount, which is going to give us a bit of randomness, and then over here we've got an object parameter. Now the object parameter is basically telling us what object would you like us to use in order to affect all of these. So clicking on object, let's click none and select the sphere that we've created. So I'm going to click on the bar and I'm just going to rotate it, and as you can see, nothing's really happening. That's because we need to play with these parameters. So I'm going to zoom in all the way. So the lean out amount, I want it to go into a negative. So as this ball is rolling in the grass, it is separating the blades of grass in a negative way, meaning they're not going towards the ball. The lean out distance is going to tell us how much we want it to lean out. So I'm going to put in a value. Let's start with 1,000, and immediately you can see how the mesh items are now being pushed out. And what's great about this as well is that it is interactive. So as I move the actual sphere, you can see that it is interacting perfectly with our actual object. Now the parameters will obviously dictate how much we want it to do. So for example, if we go underneath the wiggle amount, we can give like a bit of a randomization. You can see the blades of grass are just shifting a little bit. The lean out distance is basically using the sphere or the ball over here as a fall off. So how much effect does this ball have? So as you can see, I can control that. So if we just zoom out a little bit in the camera, you can see not only is it interactive, meaning I can move the ball as I want, but it also works great for animations. So as you can see the ball rolling, it interacts perfectly. The next one I'd like to show you is the carpet. So let's go into the carpet camera. Now we've got a rug or a carpet and we've got a piece of furniture and the model is going through the scattered area. So what we want is we want the end result for the actual scattered items to bend away from the item. So it looks like the piece of furniture is imprinted or it's leaning and squashing down the actual fibers of the carpet. And that's actually really simple to do. The first thing that we need to do is create a spline like I've done over here. Let's go into perspective mode. So this spline over here that I created is going to act as the actual exclude zone and is going to give us the power to determine which area of the actual scattered items need to react to the effect. So really important. So all I've done is very simple spline just to follow the legs of the chair. Next, what we need to do is let's go into the forest pack item. I need to add that spline in the areas tab. So really important. So let's go into F3 mode. Let's go to perspective. The spline area right over there, we need to add that, and that's this guy right over here. Let's click that. Let's make it an exclude area. Now we already know what the exclude is going to do. As you can see, it's excluding that entire area. So half the job is done already. I'm going to go really small here, just like that. The problem is, you can see that they're not really leaning out, and we want them to lean out. So let's go back into the carpet. Underneath effects, let's add an empty space. Let's grab an effect, and we are going to use the one at the bottom called lean out exclude. Now it's telling you exactly how to use it, and remember we used an exclude function in the areas tab. Let's load that function. I'm going to lean it out in the negative space because remember we want the fibers to go away from the object. And then the lean out distance, we can simply just play with it, and immediately you can see how great that looks. You can see that the fibers are actually leaning outwards, and it's given us such a good effect, like the piece of furniture is pressing down on the fibers. Random wiggle again will give us some randomization. Now I've already rendered this out to show you what the finished product will look like. So this is without the effect, and you can see it just looks terrible. With the effect, as you can see, looks really, really awesome. The fibers are leaning out. Looks like the object, or the chair in this case, is actually pressing down, giving a really great effect. Let's close that. Then we do have this, which is apply to models. In the event that you have multiple models in your forest pack, you can say apply to models, and then you can pick the model that you want. So that's really, really useful. Next on our list is cars. Let's click and go to cars. Now, in this instance, this is a great method to actually scatter cars in your scene using a spline. So let's go into the cars, and again I've got a very basic setup. I've got 3 blocks acting as cars. Let's go into the top view so we can see this better, and I have gone into the distribution and I made it into a path. So it is following the path where the cars need to go, which is great, but we can add so much more to it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go underneath effects. Let's add an empty slot. Let's click on the effect that we want and find cars along spline. Again, explains everything to you. Let's click the load button, and now we've got a couple of parameters. So the start, as you can see, it's going to start moving the items along. We've got the X off, which will just be the opposite, so wherever you want it to end. We do have the Y start, the Y end. Switch sides is very useful. We can actually just completely mirror the objects around. So the starting point is the end and the end is the starting. Empty spaces, really, really handy. If we just increase this value, you can see that we are adding more and more spaces to the actual cars, which again is always awesome. Randomize parking directions. So if you have a look over here, that is the front of the car. If we change the value to randomize it, you'll see that some will be backed up, some will be parked normally. Camera mode, again, we've got a really, really great one here. This one is called the leaf animation. So again, I've created a circle. The circle has all of the leaves here. Now I've added just a simple distribution of leaves to this, and this is just a normal tree that I've created. So what we need to do in this one is go into the effects tab right over there. Let's open up an empty slot. Let's click on the effect and find leaf fall animation. Again, it explains everything to you. Let's click the load button. Now we got a couple of parameters here to do. Number one is the start frame. So when do you want the animation to start? We can start it at 0. End frame, I'd like it to end as long as my animation is, so let's put it at 100. We got the start height, min and max. The min, I'll start it at 0. The max, let's go to about 3,500. And then we got the start rotation max, which is really great. So this is going to give some variation to our actual leaves that are falling. And as I do that, you can see all of them have moved. And then we can play around with the speed. So min and max speed, we'll leave it at the standard. Now, if I scroll, you can see that it looks like some leaves are falling, which again is really, really awesome. And what I did is I went ahead and I actually rendered out all 100 frames, and let's double click that. And as you can see, beautiful leaves are busy falling down, and they even collect at the bottom. So really powerful tool to use inside your forest pack. Next on the list, let's go to the leaves camera, and this one is going to need a little bit of tweaking with the material. This one is called tint by boundary. What we are going to do is we're going to be able to control the spline to affect the actual color or the tint of the material. So the first thing that I want to point out is that there is a forest pack. I just used the standard leaves one, but I did manipulate the actual material. So what I did is, if we go underneath material editor, I'll be able to show you. What I did is I took the material straight from the actual object. So what I did is I selected all of these guys and I created an instance of it. So click, drag, let go, instance. Now I did manipulate this material. Let me show you what I did. If we follow the diffuse slot, I added a mix map. Inside the mix map, I created two variants of the actual material. So the first one you can see is a healthy green one, and then next I've actually put it as a burnt brown version of it. Really important, the mix amount has to have a forest color map in here. That's step number one. Number two is you have to make sure that this is unticked. If this is ticked, it's not going to work. Then you need to have blending mode to normal. So if you're using a mix map, make sure underneath mix amount is a forest color. Make sure this is unticked. Make sure that is at normal. Then make sure that the material is obviously connected to the object. Next, what we do is we're going to add the actual effect. So we are looking for tint by boundary. So let's add the effect. And right over there, tint by boundary. Let's click the load button. Now for this example, I'm going to go underneath the display and I'm going to change this to points cloud so we can see the difference. The other stipulation with regards to this effect before we continue, underneath the material rollout, you have to make sure that random strength is 100 to 100. Otherwise it's actually not going to work. And don't stress, because when we go on the wand over here and we find any of these, it will tell you all of these settings. So for example, if we look at number 3, it says in the materials rollout, the random strength value is still applicable. For the tint to work fully, set the start and end to 100%. So you cannot go wrong with this. Let's click the cancel and now we can carry on. Now if we go underneath tint by boundary, the distance to edge is the only parameter that we have. If I increase this, you can start seeing that the shades are changing. So I'm going to put this at 10. Let's load up the render and start a render. So what we want is, and the way we've done this, is that all the leaves closest to the boundary, they will slowly start turning to the darker color, and that is obviously controlled by the distance to edge. So now you can see that they're all green. If I increase this, let's say to 100, you can slowly start seeing that the leaves are turning brown, and that's really awesome. Let's increase this again. Let's make it quite a big number, give it a second to load, and then you'll see that more and more leaves are now turning brown. So this is the tint by boundary, and remember the rectangle that I've done is the boundary, and whatever distance value I'm choosing here will obviously dictate when they're starting to change. Let's stop that. Next on the list is the object repulsion. Let's go into that one, click OK. Now the object repulsion is going to allow us to repel the forest pack scattered objects based off an object. So let's go inside the forest pack, and again just a normal forest pack that I've added of grass. Let's open up an empty effect. Let's click the wand over here. So what we're looking for is the one called object repulsion. And if we scroll down over there underneath dynamics, object repulsion, let's click the load button, give it a couple of seconds, and have a look at the parameters that we have. So we've got distance over here. Let's put that at, let's say, a high number, And immediately you can see what that's just done. So if I do that, it's just working off the center. Now, what we want is for it to be controlled by the object that we have. So let's click on object, click none, and select that sphere. The strength will obviously determine how strong it is. Now, this is what's fun as well. Because it is interactive, have a look. Wherever I move the ball, and again it will work with animations as well, it will follow and obviously repel wherever that object goes. Back into the modifier, the last object that we have is the controller. Now if we say pick controller, what we need to do is first find the object. If we locate this object right over here, and it's called repulsion, you can actually select the controller to control the repulsion of this object. So let's pick controller. This is going to happen. What we need to do is find the object that we want. And in this case, it's called object repulsion. We can open that up, and now we can choose the object, and at this point we can choose any of these parameters to actually control the actual repulsion value. So it can get really technical and in-depth. Next on the list is the tint by altitude. Now if I click the OK button, this is basically the same one as the leaves that we controlled. So this is in the event that you have terrain that is obviously quite high or quite low. Same concept applies, so let's quickly run through this. I've got a standard scattered object. I chose the leaves, material editor. I'm using the exact same material for this example. So again, I chose all these objects. There's the material. I have clicked and dragged the instance in there. Do not forget to make sure override is off. Blending mode is to normal, and the material, make sure that it is 100 to 100. Gonna add the effect. What we need to look for is tint by altitude, which is right over there. Again, instructions pretty awesome. Click the load button and the same concept will apply. We got altitude, we got a range, and we got a remove bottom. So altitude, let's put this at 2 meters, and then range, let's put this at 100. And again, you can now start seeing just over here what is actually happening. So this is almost like a fall off. The altitude will obviously control the altitude. You can see in the viewport the differences that it's busy happening. And then remove to bottom, if you click that, it will remove everything up to a certain altitude value. Next on the list, let's go to the camera. We've got tint by object. Click the OK button. The exact process is happening, except this time we are controlling the tint using the ball. So let's go into the forest pack. The same forest object is there. The exact same material that I just showed you is attached here, making sure random is at 100 to 100. The effect is on. Let's click the add button. So we now need to add the effect. We got tint by object right over there. Click the load button, and whenever you see a object parameter, let's click none. Let's click the ball. So that is our look at item, and then the tint fall off. Let's put this at a high value, press enter, and now you can see that the sphere is now controlling the actual scattered item, best seen with the render. So let's grab this, let's hit that render, let it load. And as that loads, you'll be able to now see the difference with the actual sphere. And if I move it interactively, you'll see it does take a while to render, but you'll see that wherever the sphere is, that is where the change in tinting will appear. Stop, close. Let's click our camera again. Let's go to the one called triangle, click the OK button. This one we are going to use the lean out include area as opposed to the exclude area. So I've got just some palm trees basically scattered inside this rectangle. So this rectangle is obviously the included area. Let's add the effect. Let's choose the effect that we want. And remember, the one that we are choosing this time is going to be the lean out include, this one right over there. Click the load button, and now we can lean out the tree. So this one's really useful if you want your scatters to be bending outwards as opposed to inwards. So we used the outward version when we were trying to split away the grass, for example, when the ball is rolling, or the carpet fibers. This time, let's go into the positives, the lean out distance. And as you can see, we are tilting the objects that we want. Now, of course, if we went into the negatives, it would obviously tilt the opposite way. The effects tab is almost endless. You can stack effects on top of one another. You can import and manipulate. So if we click this button over here, you'll see the actual coding of how this actually works. If you have knowledge, by all means go for it and experiment and create something amazing.